brings new meaning, new hope, and new way. Such is the blessing bestowed upon us. Every hardship and heartache will pass. From the mountains to the deep blue sea, everything in perfect harmony. And as the stars fill the evening sky, without a sensing, life is passing by. So if you want a solution, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'd like to welcome you to the program Raising Children, an Islamic program dealing with children's issues from conception up to and including preteens. A very important topic these days, I'm sure you'll agree. I'd like to introduce Dr. Hakeem Rasheed. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I believe you're a professor at Howard University in Washington State.
And that's actually in Washington, D.C.
Oh, Washington, D.C., I beg your pardon.
Yes.
I'm a lime.
That's okay, just one side of the country to the other.
Okay, excuse me. Washington, D.C.
Right.
So please tell us a little bit about yourself, your academic background, and how you came to Islam.
Well, I actually came to Islam the same year that I defended my Ph.D. dissertation, which is 1975. I'm born and raised in a little town called Flint, Michigan, which is the birthplace of the General Motors Corporation. And went to undergraduate school out in California, came back to Michigan to go to graduate school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was in an interdisciplinary program in education and psychology, and also picked up a master's degree in early childhood education along the way. But during that search in terms of getting the Ph.D., I also began to have kind of a spiritual crisis and began to become dissatisfied with my agnosticism, I guess you would say. And so just began a search and began to study different religions, and ultimately came to the conclusion that Islam was the truth.
What's your field?
My department is the Department of Human Development and Psychoeducational Studies in the School of Education. And I'm actually Associate Professor of Human Development at Howard.
And you've been a Muslim for the past 20 years or so?
I've been a Muslim now for the past 33 years.
Wow.
I accepted Islam in 1975. That was the same year that I defended my Ph.D. Dissertation, and it was an interesting year for me. Taking my Shahada was kind of a culmination of a spiritual search that I had been kind of engaged in. I had been an agnostic for quite a while. Raised Christian, but had given up on Christianity, but didn't really see the importance of religion, and then began to just feel dissatisfied. So I began to study, comparative religions, and really just came to the conclusion that Islam was the purest form of monotheism that I could find. And I really came to the conclusion that monotheism had existed for thousands of years, but it had been corrupted, and that Islam was the purest form of monotheism that could be found.
How do you use the Islamic view for your field of work?
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. In fact, the reason that I'm here in Sharjah is to do a paper at a conference on the impact of Islam on human civilization, and my paper is actually the influence of Islam and Muslims on the science of human development. So what I've done is gone back and taken a look at people like Ibn Khaldun, Al-Ghazali, Al-Biruni, and the kinds of work that they did and in terms of society, the individual, and culture, and really try to bring that to bear on influences in terms of Western social science and human development. So I'm able to kind of merge the two in some respects, although in some of my classes, I can't really obviously talk specifically about Islam, but I think what we're finding now is that particularly as we look at the Islamization of the social sciences, we're finding that we're able to integrate much more of the classical past in terms of Islamic scholarship into what's going on nowadays, and inshallah, that'll result in a new paradigm, if you will, in human development in the Muslim world.
Inshallah. You know, this program is about raising children, Doctor, but I'd like to, if you agree, we discuss something about the
marital relationship, you know, how to keep a marriage together.
Sure,
You've been
sure.
married, how, 40 years, is it?
Not quite 40, but I have been married, I better get this year exact right in case my wife sees this program. Been married 31 years. It'll be 31 years in just a couple of months. And, you know, 3 beautiful children, 3 beautiful grandchildren out of that marriage. And one of the things that my father told me right around the time I got married, he said, son, when you see a marriage fail, 9 times out of 10, it's the man's fault. And that stuck with me because I knew that, you know, he was operating on a lot of experience. He had been married to my mother for almost 30 years, and he had seen marriages rise and fall and be successful and fail. And even over the last 30 years of my marriage, I've seen that statistic has pretty much borne itself out, that when you see a marriage fail, it's the man's fault. And so I took it upon myself to say, I'm not going to be the cause of this marriage failing, and that I'm going to do everything that I can to keep it together. And what I've seen in terms of failing marriages is that quite often the man just becomes too impatient, too demanding. You know, I've seen situations where men have actually become jealous of their own children and felt that their wife was giving the children more attention than the husband. And of course the wife is going to give the children more attention than the husband because they're children, and that's what they need. It has to be that way. So men, you know, we just suck it up and recognize that we're not going to be the babies in the family, that you know, we need to be the providers, we need to be the partners to our wives. And, you know, as Muslims, it should be much easier because we have the perfect role model as a husband in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, all we have to do is go into look at the hadith on the Prophet, peace be upon him, as a husband, and we find that he was patient, we find that he was considerate, we find he was affectionate, we find that he had a sense of humor with his wives, we find that he helped around the house, you know, in terms of doing chores, he mended his own clothes. We find that he wasn't demanding. There's a hadith about you know, one time they were having a meal and the only spice available was vinegar, and he said, oh, vinegar's the best spice, you know. So I mean, you could see that patience and that sense of humor. So these are the kinds of things that we as men have to incorporate into our own personalities. And again, we have the best role model out there in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes, it's also interesting to note that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are the only wives of prophets that really have been entered into the light of history.
Absolutely.
To know about their behavior.
Absolutely.
And what they had to say, because as we know, married many years, the wife knows the husband better than anyone.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And they had nothing but praise and love for him.
That's right. And it can be painful because, you know, it can be, in a sense, somewhat disconcerting to have someone know you that well and that intimately. And have that person be honest with you. And sometimes, you know, we just can't handle the truth. We would rather not hear the truth. But the truth is best for us, you know. And
that's why, of course, one of the duties of the wife is to guard the husband's secrets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we would certainly expect that, and vice versa. We would certainly to expect to guard our wives' secrets.
It's a mutual thing.
It's a mutual thing. And it's another one of those things that my father told me, you know, right at the beginning of my own marriage. He said, son, at the end of the day, so to speak, when your children are grown and they're gone and everything, it'll just be you and your wife. You know, now obviously you have a Muslim ummah and you have your friends and everything, but ultimately, you know, you are there with your wife. And this is another area that sometimes is difficult for couples to deal with, is the so-called empty nest syndrome, when the children are all grown and they don't have to be cared for and attended to, and all of a sudden it's just you, the husband and the wife there together.
The British have dogs.
So, well, as Muslims, we're not going to do that, you know. No.
So it's very important, isn't it, that the husband and wife maintain a happy marriage for their benefit and for the benefit of the children?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that trying to maintain that relationship as a marriage, as a couple, has to be ongoing while the children are young. So you've got to carve out time for yourselves. I think again, it's incumbent upon the husband to recognize that the wife is going to be under a tremendous amount of stress and pressure just having the children. The more children she has, the more stress and pressure that she's going to be under in terms of managing those children. So, but you still have to do things for your wife. Whether it's fixing meals or helping around the house or being available to take some pressure off of her in terms of taking the children. One thing I don't like to hear is men talking about, well, I'm going to be babysitting. Well, you don't babysit your own children.
You're right.
You don't.
So basically, the husband and wife have to work together.
Absolutely.
The example.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank you very much for giving us this insight and also your father's words of wisdom.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, Doctor, I'll have to stop you now. We're going to take a break. And dear viewers, we'll take a break. Inshallah, we'll be back after the break, raising children. We're going to talk more on this subject with Dr. Rasheed Hakeem. Assalamu alaikum.
Like every sunrise that brings forth each day.
Welcome back. You're watching Raising Children. I'm your host, Uthman Barry, and we're going to continue the subject with our guest for today, Dr. Hakeem Rasheed.
It's another one of those things that my father told me, right at the beginning of my own marriage. He said, son, at the end of the day, so to speak, when your children are grown and they're gone and everything, it'll just be you and your wife. Now obviously we have a Muslim ummah and you have your friends and everything, but ultimately, you are there with your wife. And this is another area that sometimes is difficult for couples to deal with, is the so-called empty nest syndrome, when the children are all grown and they don't have to be cared for and attended to, and all of a sudden it's just you, the husband and the wife there together.
The British have dogs.
So, well, as Muslims, we're not going to do that,
No. So it's very important, isn't it, that the husband and wife maintain a happy marriage for their benefit and for the benefit of the children?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that trying to maintain that relationship as a marriage, as a couple, has to be ongoing while the children are young. So you've got to carve out time for yourselves. I think again, it's incumbent upon the husband to recognize that the wife is going to be under a tremendous amount of stress and pressure just having the children. The more children she has, the more stress and pressure that she's going to be under in terms of managing those children. So, but you still have to do things for your wife. Whether it's fixing meals or helping around the house or being available to take some pressure off of her in terms of taking the children. One thing I don't like to hear is men talking about, well, I'm going to be babysitting. Well, you don't babysit your own children.
You're right.
You don't
So basically, the husband and wife have to work together.
Absolutely.
The example.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank you very much for giving us this insight, and also is your secret for making your marriage last so long?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't say it's a secret, but I think the primary ingredient for us has been a strong friendship. We are each other's best friends, and I think that's important because there are times when the romance wears off, the romance wears thin, and you've got to have that friendship to fall back on.
You mean intellectually and
intellectually and compatibility, things we enjoy doing together, understanding each other,
enjoying each other's company.
And just enjoying each other's company, just sitting up having a conversation or being comfortable in silence with one another. These are friendship kinds of issues.
Definitely.
I think in many situations, couples get kind of seduced by the Hollywood concept
Don't they? Yes.
of love, romantic love, and if it's not Hollywood, then we're going to walk. It's wrong, and we're going to walk away from it. And again, particularly those of us as Muslims, we have to recognize that alhamdulillah, our first love has to be love for Islam, love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that both my wife and I, that is our first love. Our first love is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and trying to do what the Quran and what the Sunnah say to do. as to the best of our ability.
Of course.
But then we're friends. You know, we like I said, we enjoy each other. We've certainly had our ups and downs, just like any other marriage has. But you know, at the end of the day, there's a strong friendship there that can survive, you know, the Hollywood mystique, so to speak. You know.
Is your wife also an academic?
My wife is actually a clinical social worker. You know, she works with you know, families and children, you know, in crisis, and you know, family counseling, and you know.
Would that be Muslim?
She does. She has
Muslims.
a lot of Muslim clients.
Yeah. Okay.
She has a lot of Muslim clients.
And what are the common mistakes Muslims make in marriage? And
well, I think
if you can generalize,
it's hard to say in terms of a generalization, but I think quite often Muslims can get seduced by the non-Muslim world and its concepts of what marriage should be about. You know, you've got situations sometimes where a woman may become Muslim just to get a particular man, or a man may become Muslim just to get a particular woman, and they really don't have that love for Islam in their heart, you know, in terms of the primary
but sometimes
focus.
they acquire it.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But you know, I think the big challenge for Muslims, particularly in the non-Muslim world, is that interaction with the non-Muslim world that both members of the couple have to face. And again, your iman has to be strong. You know, your faith, your deen has to be strong to withstand some of the temptations that are out there. You know?
Definitely.
So right.
Because if that thing starts to go wrong, then everything will go wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The foundations are shaken.
You're right, right. And again, I think that the foundation has to be strong. You know, people need to take some time to get to know each other. We're in an area now in the Washington, D.C. area where there's more and more premarital counseling going on amongst Muslims.
Okay.
And I think that's critical. I think that people really need to take that time to go into counseling, and not as a negative kind of thing, but really to just have the parameters kind of laid out for them in an objective kind of way.
Attitude.
Talk about some of the issues that they may face, whether it be money issues, child rearing issues, personality issues. You know, a lot of men and women don't realize that really our brains are in fact wired different. Men and women are different.
Thank God for that.
Then thank God for it. You know, really. But they need to understand that, and so they don't need to rush into marriage. Take that time. Some situations it may be a 4-week, 6-week premarital counseling course to try to get those issues out there, and you know, sometimes you may make the decision that this isn't for me. You know, this particular person or this particular situation is not for me. But it's better to find out ahead of time than after a couple of children have been born into a situation.
That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started this thing amongst the Sahaba of istikhara, which is a prayer for guidance.
Absolutely.
For those who don't know.
Absolutely.
I know you know.
Right.
The istikhara that you pray to Allah, that if this thing is good for me in my deen and in my worldly life, my religion and worldly life, to make it easy for me, decree it for me, make it full of blessings. And if it isn't, then turn me away from it and find me something better.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, so that should be done, especially entering into a marriage. I think, I don't know if you agree with me, but like our parents, or certainly our grandparents, it was something that people did to have some support in life. You know, it was an inevitable thing. And they didn't expect too much from it. Like you were saying about Hollywood, I thought it was a very good point.
Right.
This romance stuff, you know,
well,
a lot
you know,
of it's fiction.
The screenwriters give us that, and if you look at some of their lives, they're in total shambles. You know, so they're telling you to live someone else's fantasy,
It's an imagination.
and they're not even living their own fantasy. So again, we have to go back to our Islamic roots and go back, and if we're gonna, you know, take a look at someone else's marriage, you know, take a look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, again, what did he do? What was his personality? What was personality of his wives, what was their interaction. Those are the kinds of things that I think have to keep us in check. Because we could be taken off in a lot of different directions by the broader non-Muslim society. A lot of crazy things going on.
And it affects everyone here,
Absolutely.
whether you're here in the Middle East or in America.
Absolutely.
Has a lot of similarities,
Right.
especially as far as the media is
Well,
concerned.
the media, there's no filtering of the media that takes place. All of the movies that are available in the United States.
There is some censorship here still, that the more lewd scenes will be taken out.
But those are not the things that are necessarily the most dangerous. I think it's the relationships that you see between the people that are really not censored. That may be the most dangerous, because then it's setting up these false expectations. And I think it's particularly dangerous for the children, as the children are coming up, as they become teenagers, as they're trying to develop an identity for themselves as young people. They're seeing these images and these relationships. You look at the music videos and all of the nonsense that you see in those, in many cases, the degradation of women.
I've often said to critics of Islamic women, saying about you Muslims, and I said, look at your rap videos.
Absolutely.
Clean your own house first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the important thing you would say is that the Muslim husband and wife should have a sound understanding of each other and what they expect of the marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I strongly believe that. And again, that can come from, premarital counseling. It can come from some period of, trying to get to know each other in a halal kind of way, a halal kind of relationship, with the appropriate parameters. But I just don't think it's wise to rush into a situation before the parties can get to know each other, fairly well.
Of course, the traditional marriages amongst the born Muslims, it often was like that they didn't know each other. They perhaps met only a couple of times across a crowded room,
Well, that's true, but at the flip side of that is that in many traditional marriages, you have a closer family situation.
Yes, it's very supportive.
Right,
isn't it?
right. And in Islam, you are allowed to marry cousins. So in some cases, it might be a second, third, in some cases even first cousin.
He did marry one himself, Zainab.
Yes, that's right.
But he did, as you say, recommend to marry outside.
Right,
This has a lot of good in it.
Right. But at the same time, there was he also said that you should not force a woman to marry anyone. That it has to be her choice.
Right.
So
marriage may be arranged, but not forced.
Right. Absolutely.
If the woman turns it down or the man turns it down,
that's right.
then the parents have to accept that.
So and so it's important for us to make that distinction between Islam and culture.
Right. It's a very important thing.
Absolutely.
Islam and culture. Yes.
Absolutely. Because sometimes
even make a
we
program
can get
out of
confused.
that. Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Doctor, for coming along and talking about all this with your vast experience. So, unfortunately, Doctor, we'll have to call a halt here. We've run out of time. We'd like to thank you very much for coming and talking about this thing, about keeping a marriage working. You've drawn your deep well of experience, and I hope, inshallah, many good tips for brothers and sisters.
Inshallah.
Thank you also, dear viewers, for watching. You've been watching Raising Children with Dr. Hakeem Rasheed, and I'm your host, Uthman Barry. We hope, inshallah, you'll join us in the future. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Like every sunrise that brings forth each day, brings new meaning, new hope, a new way. Such is the blessing bestowed upon us. Every hardship and heartache will pass. From the mountains to the deep blue sea, everything in perfect harmony. And as the stars fill the evening sky, without a sensing, life is passing by. So if you want a solution, my friend, seize this moment, this day before it ends. Turn to Him, don't you see it's